Okay, it's late, so we're going to get started. We're going to continue on. First, we have our thumbs, Kelechie. I always get her pronounce her last name wrong. Ezie. We have a golden thumb for you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And you can sit your divalicious self down there.
Oh, the oven.
Yes, we will, and you'll join us. And let's have John Davies, the director of Phunny Business, come out.
Thank you. Thanks, Jess.
You have to get your thumb, your thumb.
Oh, thank you. Can't forget my thumb.
Yes, and actually, John used to work at Siskel and Ebert show, and I think he has some.
I have a really good story to tell about that.
And the producer and founder of All Jokes Aside, Raymond Lambert. And the producer of, I'm just going blank here. Well,
Everybody Hates Chris.
Everybody Hates Chris. Thank you. I'm sorry. LeRoi. I am so sorry. I'm sorry. Good, take it slow. We're going to share microphones, but first, let's start. I want to start with you, John, and tell me, why did you decide to make this movie, Phunny Business?
Well, I had a show on MTV called Run's House that I was fired from, but the money kept pouring in on it. And I know Ali has probably been through similar situations, so I thought, hey, I'm getting paid to do nothing. And I was in Chicago, and I ran into Raymond again, who I had met in 1992 when I used to work on Comic Relief. We had done, Comic Relief was an HBO charity with Billy Crystal, Robin Williams, Whoopi Goldberg. And we used to do charity events all over the country at different clubs, and we did one at Raymond's club, and that's when I first met him. And he invited me to come back that night and watch some comedians, and I thought it was a great club. Went to it many more times over the years. Then I ran into Ray, as I said, when I was collecting the MTV money for doing nothing. Ran into him on the street, and he told me what had happened to his club. And I knew, oh, damn it, I'm going to end up making a movie with him. And it's going to drain me financially, but I'm going to love every minute of it. And so it was a passion, and we spent 3 years. I moved back to Chicago, and you saw the result.
And Raymond, the question that I'm sure everyone wants to know, will there be another All Jokes Aside?
No. Well, I mean, All Jokes Aside was one of those things where everything lined up properly. And even in working with John and Reed and Brian, we were able to really think about that. They are here? Okay. Where are you guys? Whatever. Thank you very much. They're out here somewhere. The other producers. What it allowed me to see was sort of that it doesn't just happen that often. Like, everything lines up properly, the right place, the right time, the right people, and it just doesn't. And that time, I think I'm probably a little bit jaded too with Ali being around during that time, that group of comedians is just so phenomenal, and the talent level is so high that I was just very fortunate to be around, and I just don't think you could ever do that again. So,
Yeah, when I first saw the documentary, I had attended in an audience, All Jokes Aside, when it was on the south side of Chicago, but I never knew the history of the club. I never knew how unique it was for an African-American owned comedy club, and all of the comedians who got a start there. Ali, why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience working there?
Well, it's odd for me because I was actually one of the guys that worked the other circuit at the time. I worked the Zanies, I worked the Funny Firm, and I worked all those clubs. So I always kind of had, sort of a crossover audience. So when I went to All Jokes, it was like, it seriously was a step out of basically what would have been called the Chitlin circuit, because at that time, when you performed to all black audiences, it really tended to be a bar on a Tuesday night. They figured we can make a few extra bucks, so they'd start a show at 10:30 or 11 o'clock for whoever was sitting there, and they'd pay you 15, 20 bucks or something like that. So for it to be, well run, well organized, it seems like it shouldn't be shocking, but it was, and it was incredibly refreshing. And in an odd way, it was sort of a throwback, because, when I grew up in the early 70s, the entertainment wasn't as segregated as it eventually became. Well, I mean, you have to think about the early 70s. Richard Pryor was on with variety shows. Flip Wilson was on with variety shows. Flip Wilson had the #1 comedy variety show on television. Flip Wilson was the biggest comedian in the country, and Bill Cosby had a number, at a point in time, Bill Cosby had a sitcom and a variety show. So, by the time the 90s came around, the audience had actually gotten segmented and segregated again. So it felt like more of a throwback. It was just a good, well-run, professional, great establishment and venue for comedy.
And Kelechie, I've always been very curious about the life of a female comedian and actress. What is it like for you now, and what are some of the challenges that you had in making the movie, and what would you like to see going forward from here? And by the way, the movie, not Phunny Business, but The Truth About Beauty and Blog.
Well, my film was developed because when I left college, I moved to New York and started working as an actress and doing plays and musicals, and I worked with my wonderful teacher, Rosalind Coleman Williams, who directed the film, and she said, okay, if you come up with an idea for a movie, then I'm going to direct it and edit it. Her husband, Craig Williams, who's the editor, and they have a production company, Redwall. But she said, I'm going to teach you how to produce, so you have to do that and pay for the crew. And so I brought her some ideas, and she said, that one, I've done something like that, no. And then, yeah, that's funny, go do that. So I wrote the script, and we shot it. It was very low budget. I paid for it with another actress who produced it, Tony Robis and May. And it's basically just been an amazing experience since then. It's really changed things, because before that point, when you're just on the other side of the table, you don't really have as much of a bargaining chip. I mean, there are a lot of talented actresses in New York, and who are, I walk into a room and there's 100 people that look just like me, same hair. It's kind of trippy. So, but when you make something and put your own voice in it, it's a completely different experience. So, I mean, and I think, but I did relate to, with the women in the film, who I grew up watching them. And it's true. I mean, women are judged on a lot of factors that men don't always have to deal with. We have to be, really good. You have to be attractive. You have to be a certain weight. You have to be this. You have to be that. So the bar it's really high.
John, you have a story that I think we may want to hear.
Well, 31 years ago, I was on the documentary crew at WTTW Chicago, a PBS station in Chicago, and I told the general manager, unless you give me a chance to produce, I'm going to quit. Well, so he let me quit, and right before I walked out of the building, I got a page to go and see him, and he said, I'm going to give you a shot to be a junior producer on Sneak Previews, which was the show that Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel had on public television for many years before they went to commercial TV. So I was only 1 year with them. It was 1981. And a couple of weeks into the job, I was typing up Roger's copy. And I thought, I could improve on this paragraph a little bit. Pulitzer Prize winning critic here. So I rewrote the paragraph. So we get down to the studio, it's in the teleprompter, and he rolls up to that part and he said, "What is this? Who wrote this?" And everybody moved away from me. And then I had to say, and he said, "You what?" And then I told him. And he said, "I have a new name for you, and it's going to stick until I forgive you. I'm calling you the functional illiterate." This was and people said, the fact that he's given you a nickname means he likes you. So for a couple of weeks, that was my moniker. But the real good side about that job, I learned a ton, but they also introduced me to Errol Morris, a filmmaker who I probably wouldn't have been exposed to, and they showed me a movie called Gates of Heaven, not to be confused with Heaven's Gate. It's about a pet cemetery. And it just stuck with me, how Errol Morris makes very entertaining docs. They're serious, but I like his style. It's maybe hard for you guys to see this, but there's a little bit of Errol Morris in Phunny Business. And just before I forget this, Chaz, Brian Callies, who co-produced, filmed, and edited our movie, drove here tonight from Chicago. And just another little tip to filmmakers. Our other partner, Raymond and I have another partner, and his name is Reed Brody, and he runs the best post-production facility in Chicago. So when you go to form a partnership as an independent producer, find a talented man who runs a great post-production facility.
Raymond, tell us a little bit more about how you were able to persuade the comedians at that time, even as, or did it become more difficult eventually to get Ali, LeRoi, or Jamie Foxx, or to come to All Jokes Aside? Did they start going to the Chicago theater instead?
Comedians do not need to be persuaded to get on stage. That's not the hard part.
There's no doubt the industry changed. And speaking as an entrepreneur, I certainly had blinders on and did not have the vision that this thing was moving and where it was moving to. And, it's hard to justify, and I can't ask Steve or Jamie or any of them to say, hey, won't you come for this weekend for $25,000? And they say, well, I'm making $25,000 a night. And I can be in 4 cities in 4 days and make $100,000 versus 25. I love you, but, baby need new shoes, that kind of thing. So I mean, I understood it, but I just thought, being a purist at the time, that stand-up belonged in a comedy club. I just didn't think that a theater or, God forbid, a stadium, people would actually go out to see it. But I think at one point, when I went to see the Kings of Comedy at the United Center, it dawned on me that after they had sold 45,000 tickets to see this show, it was an event. It wasn't a comedy show. And I just didn't have the vision or the wherewithal to see that coming. So I missed that.
Part of the difficulty, and this is an odd way of looking at it, I think, for Raymond, but the trick of dealing with what I'll just call the black audience is that it tends to be dealt with as a singular entity. When you're dealing with what is considered the general audience, there's enough space, there's enough audience available to attend, a 2,500 seat venue for Jerry Seinfeld or something along those lines, and still have enough other audience interested in seeing up-and-coming artists who are developing their craft. But when you're dealing with the black audience, which is just a smaller segment of the audience, once they see something germinate and then they see it manifest into something that's great, they want to be a part of that same experience. So there's just physically less audience available to go to the 2,500 seat big show and to the 250 seat little show. There's just not enough audience available. Yeah, I mean, you see that same thing in television or in film, when, whether it's Kelechie and what she wants to do, or whether it's Wanda Sykes, if she's got to go up against Wanda, if they're on the same night, she's going to lose. But if Wanda's not around, then they'll go see her. It's just, what is available for the audience to go see. You can't put her on one channel and like I said, and Monique on another channel. She's going to lose. They're just going to go for the bigger, better, brighter, shinier thing because there's just not enough audience in that black segment for there to be niches. It's just not enough people available. So that's the tough part about him trying to run a 300-seat club when Bernie Mac is down the street doing 3,000 seats at Chicago Theater. Everybody that was at his show is at that show. So it's just tougher.
No, I mean, that's true, but the thing is, again, speaking entrepreneurially, I should have been at both, you know what I mean, both places. I could have probably done that. I just didn't have the vision to do it. I was not that smart. Exactly.
And I was going to say the thing about politicians and Chicago. I was going to say things have changed, except we just sent someone to jail, didn't we? Maybe it hasn't changed that much.
Well, that's, really the amazing thing is this only happened to Raymond in near the year 2000. This isn't that far in the past. I don't think a single thing has changed. I think he'd have trouble opening in that district today. That's one of the points we make in the movie. There's other people who've been blocked too. That's one of the techniques they use. They try and deny and postpone your liquor license so they bankrupt you. You end up winning, but by that time you've been paying rent on the space, and so there's a lot of ways in Chicago they can kill your business.
Are you talking about a neighborhood
Yeah,
problem like it was for you?
Yeah, I think if Raymond were to try and open in that same district, he'd have some opposition. And it's, interestingly enough, I think the Female Impersonator Club, the Nudie Club, the X-rated bookstore, that's all still there. And there's a way in Chicago to grease the wheels. And I always used to say to Raymond, well, so why didn't you grease the wheels, Raymond? And Raymond has an answer for that. Can I?
And what is your answer?
Well, yes. Well, first of all, I said it to John, I'm like, you probably don't know anyone who's been to jail before. So, but what I felt like I can't do that because, and this is culturally speaking, well, one, I wouldn't do well in jail in the first place. I mean, that's the first thing, okay? But I can see myself being that one person that they say, that's handing the envelope across the table, and they say, well, wait a sec, and I get busted for doing that. And I just didn't want to be a part of it. It's just like, I'm either going to do it the right way or I'm just not going to do it at all. But it's interesting what John says, and that's just the way it goes, But I had a conversation, this is true.
I just like they're applauding the integrity of your failure.
No, you know what? And there is integrity in failure. But someone told me, this is just last week, that they would not try to open a facility above Roosevelt Road in the city of Chicago right now. They wouldn't even attempt to do it, wouldn't even try it. It's just not even worth doing. So, I mean, that's just the nature of the city, I guess, and that's just how it operates.
I do applaud your integrity. I would hope that things would be a little different now. I don't know.
Well, you would think with a black president, but if anything, it's almost like the scab's been picked off and the wound's even bigger. I mean, it's amazing what's going on right now. I mean, race is always going to be an issue. Boy, is it an issue right now. I mean, more so than it was for Raymond, I think, at that time.
But no, that's not what I meant. I meant only because the U.S. Attorney has sent so many people to jail that it seems like the system has to be a little more transparent. That's what I meant. So, anyway,
You just want me to talk.
Yeah.
I love it. Just as somebody.
It's been a long day.
wanted to tell us about how you're transitioning.
Well, transitioning from stand-up into television.
Yes.
Well, the great part about being in this incubator of talent is, you meet people who do a variety of things, and the odd part for me is that I actually came to stand-up as a second choice. I started off writing, like in high school. I wrote sketches. I wrote for articles for newspapers and that sort of thing. And it's rare, especially with black talent, it's rare the person that doesn't want to be in front of the camera. So, you know, I wrote material for Chris Rock. I wrote material for Bernie Mac. You know, so a guy who wants to be an asset and a part of the process in that way, you know, as these guys moved on further in their careers, you know, and then Chris is on television, and you know, and Bernie did television shows as well. You know, to be a guy that wanted to come in and support that part of the process. And for me, the practical part of it was just a shorter line. You know, I mean, I think I'm funny, but I didn't clamor and want to be on stage the same way that Chris wanted to be on stage, that Steve wanted to be on stage. You know, I wasn't as interested in that part of it. So to actually be someone who was trying to, you know, break into another part of the industry, for me, that transition was just a little bit different, a little more interesting, because there just weren't as many guys trying to do it. You know, and as of right now, I'm probably one of 2 or 3 what they call in television industry showrunners. I'm one of 2 or 3 black male showrunners, and
That's it.
yeah,
Well,
and the
actually,
black female showrunners that I'm aware of are Shonda Rhimes, who has Grey's Anatomy. There's a woman who you don't know by name. Her name is Pam Vise. She is a showrunner for, I think, the Criminal Minds, one of the Criminal Minds franchises, and another woman named Mara Brock Akil, who has The Game on BET. There's like 6 of us.
Well, actually, I don't want to forget this because Raymond and I should have been mentioning him earlier, but one of the other showrunners narrated our movie. His name is John Ridley.
John Ridley,
He
yes.
wrote Red Tails, George Lucas's film. He's a novelist as well. Three Kings was his, based on his novel. Undercover Brother came from an online zine. John's been a showrunner on Barbershop on Showtime. He's still on everybody's short list, but he narrated the film for us, and I think did a great job. He was a stand-up also, and I finally forced him to show me some footage. And I said, you know, he's going to be a great writer.
John Ridley was, I did not know he was stand-up. He always comes across so kind of more, you know, serious and businesslike when I...
He's gotten much more serious in his career now. I mean, John is has a lot to say politically. You see him on all these shows. And he also...
Very bright.
John started off, he was a writer on Martin Lawrence's sitcom. That's what John Ridley started off, yeah.
I think he wrote on Fresh Prince too, I know, and sort of came up that way. But the one thing he has that I envy him is when things are going bad for him in either the movie or TV world, which is not too often because he works pretty steady, he's a novelist. He can always go home and write a book and not have to take shit from anybody in show business.
Well, I think it's time to go to our audience, and I understand that tonight we're going to change the, instead of looking and saying you, the mic, the people who are operating the mics will let us know. So let's get the mics prepared, and we'll start with the questions.
Okay, I have one right here, almost directly in front of you, a little to your left. Right here.
Okay, oh, there you are, okay.
Hey, Raymond. Really enjoyed the movie. I'm just curious what you're doing now. Did you have another venture lined up when the North Side Club failed, or Raymond? I'm talking to Raymond.
Okay, repeat that question. Did you?
I was just curious what you're doing now, or what did you have another venture lined up when the club failed, or did you go back to finance?
No, actually, immediately after the club failed, I went back corporate. I worked for Stars Entertainment Group, the cable network channel. I had a great relationship there, and spent 5 years there. And then, well, for the last 3, I ran into John. And it's been about 3 years since we've been working on this particular project. So, what's next? Probably something in this realm. I mean, I think I like it. The business side of it is unlike anything I've ever experienced anywhere, anytime. But you know, if you can get things done, then it's really, really cool. So that's sort of where I am.
From the balcony up here.
Balcony.
Oh, there.
Mr. Lambert, as an entrepreneur, this story, I mean, it was a very funny movie, but it was the story of an entrepreneur going through some really great times and the inevitable bad times. And I work with some other entrepreneurs from a range of backgrounds. And can you talk a little bit about what it will take to make more successful businesses owned and run by African American peoples in both Chicago and, well, in Champaign-Urbana would be nice too.
Okay, I think I heard everything. So what would it take to sort of, for a successful venture versus unsuccessful, or just in general philosophy on entrepreneurship?
If there are things that you can think of that will help African American ventures do better.
Sure. You know, and Ali actually touched on one thing that sort of is a takeaway for me in this movie, is the idea of failing successfully, which I spent a lot of time thinking about this since we've made this movie, and the notion that, you know, you're going, I mean, 9 times out of 10, things are not going to work out the way you want them to, but how do you fail, and fail in such a way that it's successful? And in this particular thing, I think I got so caught up in the moral and social issue around, this is not right, I'm going to fight for my rights, that wasn't necessarily the best thing to do entrepreneurially. That's my particular, it was good morally and socially, but it wasn't good economically. So I always feel like what I take away from it was, well, wait a second, know when to fold them, know when to hold them, and perhaps I should have gotten out sooner, as soon as I recognized this as an entrepreneur, and say, okay, well, where's the other avenue and where's the other place in which I can move and go about it. But once you throw sort of the race into it and that whole struggle part of it, you know, you can get caught up in that.
Good intentions have no place in business.
Right, exactly. And so for me, that's like a big part of it. How do you deal with failure and sort of failing successfully, if that makes any sense?
Hi, I really enjoyed the movie, both of them, actually. I had a question about the writing process for the documentary. I think when you feature, you know, a lot of comedians and your movie is about comedy, it would be really easy to rely on just funny people being really funny. But I thought it was really great that the voiceover narration and the overall story also had a lot of just comedy in it as well. What was the writing process like in working on that?
Well, that's definitely our intention, was to do that. I remember when we started on it, Raymond said, you know, like, John, why don't you let the comedians handle the funny part? And I thought, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I wouldn't want to just watch it unless we tried to do something funny around the comedians. And I also felt that I'd been working in this business long enough that I could do it. I actually thought maybe John Ridley might do a pass on our voiceover and punch it up a little bit comedically, but he said, hey, it's good the way it is. And then our editor helped find jokes by just, you know, the juxtaposition of one shot next to another. Some jokes just appeared. I mean, things like when we used the Black Panther footage, and I've been looking for a movie to put that footage in for 10 years, because I love it so much. And then when we had that hard cut to Raymond, he says, I hired a lawyer. You know, you could just see where the jokes were going to come. And I've worked my whole life in comedy, too, at Second City, and I've worked for Comic Relief for many years, and I've been around it enough, and I felt, I can handle this. This isn't that hard to write a funny documentary. And we felt pretty good every time we have a screening. People laugh in the right places, and I'm really glad we made that decision to commit to making a funny movie. Only one critic has complained about it. Christopher Borelli from the Tribune said he didn't understand why we felt the need to make a movie about comedy funny. Okay. I have a little theory about every project I do, and the word comedy or fun has been in a lot of my shows, but if you're going to use the word comedy in your title, it better be funny.
Just right of center, right here.
Good evening. I really enjoyed both projects, but I had a question for the creator of the Beauty and Blogs film, and that is that you seem to be really making a really interesting, presenting an interesting commentary on like the intersections between Black women, social media, and celebrity. And I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about the positives and the negatives of that, because there's all this conversation lately about Girls and Pan Am and Mad Men and the extent to which so many programs are whitewashed currently as if that's new. But I want you to talk a bit about whether or not you think that things like YouTube or social media are one of the few spaces where Black women can create their own kind of public identities and the positives and negatives of that. Thanks.
That was a really great question. Yeah. Kind of a thesis, which basically, I mean, I agree that social media and the internet is one of the few spaces where Black women have, you know, a multitude of shows. And someone asked me earlier today, do you make your own YouTube videos? And I don't have I have some comedy videos up there, but I don't have a blog. But I got the idea because there are so many hundreds and thousands of women who have their own hair channels and give you tips and makeup advice and how to put together your own, you know, shea butter sleep mask to wear to deep condition your hair while you're asleep and things like that. So, and then you have the success of the web series Awkward Black Girl, which I don't know if everyone is familiar with, but Issa the creator, has, you know, 1 million viewers per episode, and she just started with no budget, you know, released it on YouTube, and then had a Kickstarter campaign. She was trying to raise, I think, $30,000. She ended up raising $60,000. So if anyone knows Kickstarter, I mean, to outdo your own budget is crazy. And basically, I think, to answer your question, it's great that the internet is there, but clearly I would love to see more women of color, you know, of all races on television figured prominently as well. And so it's an ongoing conversation. It's not new, but I think every time there's a new show that comes up that's supposed to be the voice of a generation or an era and takes place in a diverse city like New York City, it's always going to come up. Well, how do we factor in other people who you meet? You know, I went to Princeton University. I have a really diverse background of friends. I grew up in Buffalo, New York, which is kind of segregated city, not like Chicago, but it's an ongoing thing. But it was definitely great. You know, one of the joys of writing my own work is getting to have a character that is balanced and can remind all different types of people of, you know, weird things that they do themselves, but it's a whole person. It's not, you know, through a stereotypical lens or someone's best friend or sassy neighbor or something, so.
Yes, panel, a gentleman to your right has a question.
Hello, I'm editing, sorry, I can't, I'm in a wheelchair, sorry. I'm editing a book on Chicago film locations at the moment, and thanks to John Davies sending me a DVD across the Atlantic, I'm going to be able to feature Phunny Business in it. As the title, World Film Location Chicago, suggests, we're focusing on films that make very good use of Chicago locations, whether that's something obvious like the Blues Brothers or something less obvious like Vincent: A Life in Color. And as we're focused on the locations, I just wondered if you could talk briefly about the actual All Jokes Aside club, the building, what the atmosphere was like, and how that shaped the experience of the comedians and the audience that went there.
Ray?
This is actually, is that you, Scott? Scott, let me get your name correct. Jordan Harris.
Yes, that's right, Scott Jordan Harris.
Is one of our guests visiting from London and writes for The Atlantic and...
The Spectator.
The Spectator. And we're very happy to have you here.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
At the time when we started, which was '91, the South Loop was considered sort of I don't know, not desirable. It wasn't undesirable, but it wasn't you know, what you would find there today. But the interesting thing about it is, not being from Chicago, I had no idea actually where I was in the whole scope of things. So when we look back on it, I was really in the middle of the west side and the south side. I mean, I sort of met in the middle. So I wasn't too far west, so that west siders felt comfortable in coming to where our location was. And I was not too far west that south siders felt comfortable in coming to it, because there is a very distinct difference between the two if you're not from Chicago. So for me, and I use two comedians to do that for me, that tells me distinctly where you can see the difference. Adele Givens is from the west side of Chicago, and it's very west side. Her act is, I mean, it's west side of Chicago. Bernie Mac is south side of Chicago to me. Very south side. It's a different look. It's a different attitude. And we just were fortunate. That's just one of those lucky things where we ended up in a place where everybody could come together and nobody felt uncomfortable. And it just was like a stroke of luck. And now the South Loop has been considered one of the sort of fastest growing neighborhoods, not just in Chicago, but in America. And yeah, well, Mayor helped. And yeah, definitely. The mayor lived there, or at least one of his houses was there. But so that was just all one of those things that happened. But and Chicago is very distinct in its neighborhoods. And where part of Chicago are you from, and where do you live? And you can speak to that for sure.
You know, it actually speaks to the segregated nature of Chicago, because all of these fine distinctions that Raymond just made, his club is downtown. That's, I mean, in the simplest of distinctions for everybody in the city, the club is downtown. In terms of whether it's a desirable neighborhood or not a desirable neighborhood, all jokes aside, is around the corner from a Chicago police station. It's 2 or 3 blocks from Roosevelt University. It's a few blocks from Columbia College. It was on Wabash Avenue, which is a block away from Michigan Avenue, which is the Magnificent Mile. So all of the indicators of what would be a safe and economically prosperous area to have this club in were there. But the fine distinctions that Chicagoans make about where they should go or where they shouldn't go can be dictated as simple as a street. So he's south of Congress.
Yes.
So Congress is literally, it's a big, broad boulevard, and it's a line of demarcation. That's where the safe part of downtown ends, and you cross over into something that becomes a little more seedy. And so the area between Congress and Roosevelt is bars, clubs, you know, everything that was in the Blues Brothers movie that felt like Gut Bucket Soul Chicago. It's all right there in that little area. You know, that's really where it kind of takes this character from. But it's around the corner from universities, Jet Magazine, Ebony Magazine, Johnson Publishing Company, right there. All of these things are like a stone's throw. That whole area has become really developed now. But for Black Chicago, it was going downtown. So it was a more elevated experience than being on 21st or 22nd and Michigan Avenue, or in Bronzeville on 43rd and King Drive, which were distinctly black neighborhoods. For white Chicago, it was crossing that line of Congress, and we don't really have a reason to go over there. We don't know what those people are doing over there in that seedy, dark, dangerous part of town that's just on the other side of downtown. So it just wasn't where they went. Now if you go there and you see how it's developed, it's turned, that whole area now has just become you know, it's been gentrified. It's a booming district now. If he tried to go back there now, they wouldn't give him a club.
Exactly.
I have to make one correction. Everyone would go over to that area if you were going to a blues club. Right. If you were going to the checkerboard lounge or some of the blues clubs, then right. You would go. But it's really interesting to hear you give that sort of dissertation on geography, because you're right, I've never thought of it that way, because I'm from Chicago and I'm from the west side of Chicago, and so even just a few blocks can make a difference. The area that was thought of as being not quite the same or not quite as safe was a few blocks from all of these universities and all of these other
The Conrad Hilton
businesses. Yeah, yeah. So very, very interesting. Other questions?
From the balcony all the way up.
Hi, my question is for the director of Phunny Business, and you mentioned that your film is influenced a little bit from Gates of Heaven, and from that director's films. I've seen that film, and I was just wondering any examples of how Phunny Business is influenced by that.
Just two things, really. I love how he uses big graphics, Errol Morris. He has huge newspaper clippings going through the frame, and we did a lot of that. But the part that's the most like him is that in Fast, Furious, and Out of Control, is that the correct title? When he's really trying to show the crazy mania of these three guys, the lion tamer, the hedge clipper, and I can't remember the third, the guy who was obsessed with mole rats. When I first realized Raymond was a little OCD, I'm like, ooh. This is an opportunity for me to do some Errol Morris surgery on Raymond and turn him into a full-blown crazy. And we did that a little bit, I think in a fun way, and Raymond graciously went along with it. But you listen to the music underneath that section and where I've got Raymond's head moving back in the frame, and we're talking about him maybe being Howard Hughes. You know, I remember when Brian and I found that piece of music, I went, yeah, that sounds like it's out of an Errol Morris movie. So that was our little tip of the hat to him. Other than that, not too much. But the one thing I've always learned from him, and I'm not a serious documentarian, anything I've ever done in documentaries, kind of tongue-in-cheek, got a sense of humor about it. But the one thing I learned from Errol, while you're in the middle of shooting your movie, and if you are telling kind of a funny story, if you meet some other people that have nothing to do with your movie, but they're still funny as hell, they go in. You leave them in. And if you watch Gates of Heaven, you know, he meets this crazy couple that are not part of the pet cemetery. These people he meets on the porch, he spends 10 minutes on them. It's a riot. And I like the way he doesn't have rules, and he's a really interesting filmmaker to me. And I would have never known much about him, except back when Gene and Roger were on public TV, we had 28 minutes, 30 seconds to fill every week. It's a longer half hour than a commercial hour, which is like 22 minutes and 30 seconds. So they were able to pay attention to documentaries and to foreign films in a much bigger way than they could when they went to commercial TV. So they were really my first exposure to some serious heavy-duty documentarians, and they championed a lot of people's careers before anybody else was doing it.
That was a good question, because about how you were, what from the Errol Morris movie you sort of adopted. He was here on the stage at Ebertfest, but I forget which movie he brought. Does anyone remember? Was it Gates of Heaven? Oh, okay.
Well, I remember your husband he just loved that movie.
Yes.
And he pushed it. The only movie I remember during the brief period I worked with him that they pushed more was My Dinner with Andre.
Oh, My Dinner with
And
Andre,
they were hitting
yes.
that every week. I remember Louis Malle sent a huge fruit basket, you know.
One more question in the front.
Thank you, everybody. I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Lambert for the memories. From Jerome Dix to Godfrey on Saturdays with the kids to Aaron Foster, the tape player. Those were fabulous memories, and I love home, I love the South Side, and I love the West Side, but going to work 2 or 3 times a month, I always looked forward to Friday night or Saturday night running to see a show before I left back to come to Champaign. So thank you so much for being a purist and for bringing that home for a while.
Thank you very much.
Well, okay, one more question. Can we get the mic right down here in front, please?
Thank you for taking the question. You're in a room full of film files, and we like these movies because I think they challenge ideas, but I think what comedy does that as well. And I don't know if you had that feeling, Raymond, or if the director, if there's anything about comedy that you feel is so socially relevant in changing things that it felt important to do, or if it was just, like you said, just the luck and timing of everything. But to me, it really challenges people to think, and I think that's a great thing about comedy. Just wondering what you think.
Now, what is the essence of your question?
She's making us think.
What's your feeling about comedy and the role it plays? Is it important to you because you feel like it makes change? Was that a satisfying part of your experience? To anybody that has a, because
Right.
Films, I think a lot of us appreciate the art of the film, but comedy too.
You know, I mean, it's twofold. You know, in a very in the most immediate way, comedy for the performer has absolutely nothing to do with the audience. It's an entirely self-serving venture because it serves our need for approval. That's why comedians do comedy, because they're desperate people who need attention. That's number one. Now, the goal of being successful at comedy is to be able to continue to get the attention. Then once you have the attention, then it's like, well, what the hell am I going to do with all of this attention? So, I mean, there certainly are, you know, I mean, when you start going all the way back to, you know, the court jester, you know, and what that means in terms of social commentary, it's the one kind of safe bastion. You know, generally what people feel about comedians is that they really can't hurt anybody, so they kind of have this license to say and do and express things that are in the zeitgeist, things that other people don't have the freedom or the license to kind of say. So there's that part of it. I don't think that, you know, we start out, any of us, really attempting to be socially responsible, but generally as observers, we just tend to comment on things that we feel or see as being absurd. And if nothing else, if it's more in intrinsic form for some guys, then it's just sort of an exercise of pain. You know, so, and that's the Woody Allen school of comedy. You know, it really comes from, you know, I feel this way about myself, whether there's self-loathing or self-deprecating humor. I see myself in the world in this way. So shining a light on myself and expressing all of these foibles and difficulties that I have existing in the world is my way of actually being able to get through it. You know, then you have the observationist style, which comes from, you know, George Carlin, you know, as an example, who is looking at all the absurdities of the world. George Carlin really never talks about himself. You really don't know what George Carlin thinks about himself. You just know what he thinks about everything else. So it's just a different school, you know, and then Bill Cosby, and by extension, Richard Pryor, you know, you have these storytellers who are really relating your own experience back to you and saying, you know, we're all part of this one big same thing. So, you know, I mean, the purpose of it, again, really in the most immediate form, it's really self-serving. Desperate people in need of attention. Now, how they exercise this, you know, there are different forms and different genres, you know, and some guys, like I say, are just dying for a laugh. So you have your Jim Carreys and your John Belushi's, guys who just do big, bold, crazy things just so people will look at them. But again, it's still the same sort of thing at work. You know, Smokey Robinson was right, The Tears of a Clown. You're never going to find sadder people than comedians if you actually sit down and have a conversation with them. So, you know, we're glad that you benefit from it, but we're really sad.
We have a lot of DVD extras from Ali, LeRoi, and you get our DVD, by the way. And now I know what our next, who our next subject should be. Don't you, Ray?
Sure. I mean, just to give an answer that's not in any way as profound as that was, some of my favorite comedy that I'm attracted to is definitely satire, and I think comedy is a tool to use to talk about things that you just get away with a lot, and you can poke fun at things and kind of bring people over to your side and laugh and say, isn't that ridiculous? Even when, you know, you kind of know the person actually maybe doesn't agree with you, but it's just a way to bring light to certain things. So even in, you know, the first movie we watched, it's making you think about the meaning of life while you're laughing at just absurd things that are going on. So.
Well, thank you all tonight. That was great. And thank you, the audience, for coming and for staying, and we'll see you tomorrow. You know, there are panels in the morning. I hope that you have your film festival program booklets because I'm not, I don't remember which panel is tomorrow morning, but the panels start tomorrow. Actually, this year we have more panels than before. I think we have 2 panels a day, every day, so in the morning. So.
Thank you for our thumbs up, Jazz. We really, we all love.